In the dead of night, thick fog blankets the mountains as a desperate chase unfolds. A barefoot boy with flowing ash-colored hair races through the dark forest, his torn robes flapping wildly behind him. Terror fills his eyes as he stumbles over a hidden route and tumbles violently down a treacherous slope. Struggling to his hands and knees, young Ash curses under his breath, feeling his strength draining away with every labored breath. But this is no ordinary escape. As he lifts his gaze, his heart sinks. Cloaked figures surround him completely, their presence suffocating. They'd planned this ambush from the very beginning. One assassin, perched confidently on a high tree branch, mocks the prince for taking only 30 minutes to reach their trap. Laughter erupts from the killers as they brandish their naked blades, circling their prey like wolves. Ash's voice cuts through the darkness with defiant strength despite his exhaustion. He demands answers. Why hunt him when he has no desire for the throne, no interest in palace politics? The hooded leader's eyes gleam with cold malice as he explains the brutal truth. It doesn't matter what Ash wants. From the moment of his birth, his very existence as a potential heir makes him a target. This isn't personal, it's procedure. The assassins promise him a painless death, acknowledging his royal blood despite calling his mother's lineage low class. Those words ignite a fire within Ash. Rage floods his veins as he draws a concealed knife, refusing to die without a fight. The lead assassin smirks, recognizing Brooke's bodyguard might have taught the boy some moves, but quickly dismisses him after seeing his amateur stance. Blood means nothing if you can't wield a weapon properly. 4 cloaked killers surge forward on command. The brutal exchange is swift and decisive. With a single strike to Ash's palm, his knife goes flying. A powerful hand wraps around his throat, lifting him off the ground. The boy struggles, gasping for air, but his fingers find another blade hidden at his back. In a desperate gamble, he plunges it deep into his attacker's throat. Blood sprays across the forest floor as the shocked assassin collapses, choking on his own life. The remaining killers freeze in disbelief. How could someone untrained in martial arts claim one of their own? Before they can process this, another attacker explodes with fury, launching himself at Ash with a devastating knee strike to the chin. The prince crashes to the ground, coughing blood. The enraged killer drives his blade deep into Ash's torso, pinning him to the earth. Agonizing screams echo through the forest as the sadistic assassin grinds his boot into the wound, savoring every moment of the prince's suffering. Just when death seems inevitable, reality itself seems to shatter. A blinding flash erupts across the clearing, followed by an earth-shattering explosion that obliterates the torturer instantly. The assassins stare in horror at their companions' scattered remains. Standing at the edge of the battlefield is a figure crackling with white lightning, dressed in impossibly strange modern clothing. The mysterious warrior radiates such overwhelming power that the killers dare not approach. One brave assassin charges anyway, demanding to know who this intruder is. Another flash, and the attacker simply ceases to exist, scattered to pieces before his blade can even swing. The sole surviving killer recognizes the impossible technique, the legendary lightning step skill that erases distance itself. Terror consumes him as he realizes this isn't just any fighter, this is someone who has reached the absolute pinnacle of martial mastery. Understanding his mission is complete with Ash mortally wounded. The last assassin attempts to flee. He doesn't make it 3 steps before bursting apart mid-leap. The lightning warrior approaches Ash's dying body, pulling out a strange device from his clothing. Speaking cryptically about being an ancestor, he injects the contents directly into the prince's chest before vanishing as mysteriously as he appeared. A mechanical voice suddenly announces itself inside Ash's fading consciousness, a 7th-generation nanomachine from something called Sky Corporation. The voice explains it has now integrated with his nervous system. Ash's world goes dark. The ancient history of this world is steeped in bloodshed and evolution. Long ago, warriors of the Celestial Empire developed martial arts purely for survival. over countless generations. These techniques evolved from simple self-defense into an entire philosophy of life encompassing nutrition, breathing methods, spiritual development, and combat mastery. The knowledge passed down through sacred texts became so comprehensive it formed complete systems of power. Those who mastered these arts, known as murim warriors, possessed abilities that transcended ordinary human limits. But ambition corrupted the next generation. Young students, hungry for power, united to seize the secrets their elders refused to share. The murim society fractured violently into loyalists and traitors, each faction unable to destroy the other. This precarious balance held for decades until an entirely new force emerged: the magicians, wielding powers called magic that threatened to overturn everything. This is the story of someone who seeks to overthrow the Lord of Magic himself and claim that supreme position. This is the story of Prince Ash. He awakens abruptly in his own bed, drenched in a sticky black substance, frantically checking his stomach where the sword had pierced him. The wound is completely gone. Confusion turns to horror as he realizes his body is covered in dark spots and reeking of expelled toxins. The mechanical voice returns, asking if the user is awake. Ash leaps from his bed in panic, searching for the source of the voice before realizing it's coming from inside his own head. The Nano Machine introduces itself properly, explaining it has established a direct neural connection with Ash's brain. The prince demands normal answers, unable to comprehend what this thing is. Is it a spirit obtained through magical cultivation? The machine patiently clarifies it is not a spirit but a technological creation, though it means nothing to the medieval prince. When Ash asks who he's speaking to, Nano repeats its designation as a 7th-generation device. The prince clutches his head in frustration. If this is a spirit, it must be the kind obtained by mastering the sacred magical fire. He drops to all fours, desperately asking if he's truly communing with a spirit. Nano remains silent, unable to process the question in terms Ash can understand. His bodyguard James arrives with the white advisor Weiss, a man renowned throughout the realm for his medical expertise. They discuss the assassination attempt as they walk, noting this wasn't the first attempt on Ash's life, but it was the boldest. Weiss suspects the northern magical organizations are behind it, emboldened by the Lord's decision to spare them previously. James confirms someone helped the young master, though identifying them proves impossible. The bodyguard still remembers the horrific scene. He discovered bodies torn apart and scattered across the forest floor. Only one assassin remained intact, the knife James gave Ash buried in the man's throat. And there, breathing peacefully despite his shredded clothing, lay the prince without a single wound on his body. The sword strike was evident in the fabric, but the flesh beneath remained unmarred. Weiss touches his beard thoughtfully, wondering who would intervene in such a minor skirmish. The faction leaders wouldn't concern themselves with eliminating a single illegitimate prince. James agrees, carrying a small medicinal bag. The old advisor chuckles, admitting his curiosity is thoroughly aroused. He must examine the young gentleman himself. Meanwhile, Ash kneels in his room, asking the inner voice if it saved him from his enemies. Nano clarifies that it did not prevent the attack, but it did restore his body and prevent a lethal outcome. The prince doesn't quite grasp the term lethal outcome, which Nano finds puzzling since the information should be present in his brain. When Ash admits he doesn't understand the word user either, Nano announces it will search for more suitable terminology from this era. After processing, the Nano Machine clarifies it is not the creature the master calls a spirit. Ash notices the dialect has changed and asks what it truly is. Nano warns it will now download basic information and usage instructions directly into the prince's brain, requesting permission. Though barely comprehending the explanation, Ash agrees. Lightning envelops him as streams of data flood his consciousness. The overwhelming sensation triggers immediate nausea, and the prince vomits violently onto the floor. Nano explains this reaction is normal during the first information transfer and won't recur in future sessions. Ash slumps against his bed, hand covering his face as he complains about feeling ill and not understanding what's happening. Opening one eye, he addresses Nano, which immediately responds to the master's call. Looking at the black spots covering his hand, Ash asks if this means countless tiny mechanisms currently inhabit his body. The voice confirms approximately 6.5 trillion nanomachines are evenly distributed throughout his system. The prince mentally exhales, still unable to grasp what this entity is neither person nor spirit. Sitting in lotus position, Ash asks if the nanomachines can leave his body. Nano references the transmitted information, explaining its programming includes complete departure only upon the master's final death. The protagonist realizes this mysterious stranger who eliminated the northern mages must have implanted Nano inside him, but he cannot fathom why this happened to him specifically. Before he can ask who performed the implantation, James knocks on the door, announcing the White Advisor has arrived. Ash jumps in surprise, urgently asking Nano to remain silent. He understands if anyone sees him conversing with a mechanism inside his head, they'll assume he's lost his sanity. The nanomachine explains it can communicate through thoughts by reading brain waves directly. The prince whispers his understanding and requests complete silence. Nano switches to temporary sleep mode. James enters with Weiss, noting the young master appears to still be sleeping, and they should be careful. Before finishing his thought, he rushes to the bedside upon seeing Ash awake. The bodyguard worries over the boy's condition, then suddenly recoils, covering his face and asking about the terrible smell. Ash realizes he completely forgot about the expelled toxins covering his body. Weiss scratches his beard thoughtfully, asking if the boy remembers him. Ash confirms he could never forget the White Advisor who answered the call to treat his mother. The old physician extends his hand, requesting to measure the protagonist's heartbeat. The boy grows nervous, but Weiss assures him it's nothing serious and urges him to offer his hand. Ash presents his blackened, spotted hand, and the advisor begins reading his pulse. Shock crosses Weiss's face as he declares this is simply amazing. James becomes agitated, shouting questions about what the old man means, immediately fearing the worst, that the young master suffers from some terrible illness. Weiss releases Ash's hand, noting it's actually the opposite. He admits complete bafflement at the protagonist's condition. When James demands clarification, the old physician strokes his beard habitually and explains all toxins have been expelled from the prince's body, and his pulse has become healthier than ever before. He suspects Ash consumed some kind of miraculous medicine. The prince turns his head toward the old man, not understanding the explanation and requesting clarity. Standing by the bed, Weiss explains the young master's body is now in optimal condition for mastering martial arts. Ash is stunned. He realizes the sticky black substance covering him was waste material expelled from within. The protagonist examines himself while lying down, amazed that Nano accomplished all this. The mechanism responds to what it thinks is being called, asking if the master wishes to deactivate sleep mode. The boy grants permission, and sleep mode immediately disengages. Ash feels as if lightning courses through his entire body. The mechanical voice explains the nanomachines removed all harmful toxins present in the master's body and restructured the circulatory and muscular systems to be optimally suited for physical training. The prince swallows hard, still struggling to comprehend what he's dealing with. He raises an eyebrow skeptically and mentally asks Nano if it's certain it isn't a spirit. The mechanism answers it is a nanomachine, not a spirit. Weiss continues his examination, explaining that although the magic cult was formed from many clans and families, only 6 main clans hold true power: sword, darkness, stream, poison, sound, and blade. The Lord took an oath to marry a woman from each main clan, ensuring each would bear him an heir. These successors were raised according to tradition, and upon reaching the appropriate age, were accepted into the Magic Academy. This legendary academy opens its doors only once every decade, founded to train the finest warriors of each generation. It's overseen by the magistrate's leading expert. In past eras, periods of exceptionally intense rivalry occurred when multiple princes entered simultaneously, times remembered as the Battles of the Heirs. Ash asks Nano if it's certain it isn't an evil god. The mechanism reiterates it is a machine, not an evil god. The boy completely forgets his current situation, turning away from Weiss as he remembers he belongs to the Poison clan, meaning he shouldn't reveal he possesses Nano. However, the mechanical voice warns that the technology of this era cannot detect its existence. The white advisor contemplates silently, certain someone assisted the protagonist. The old physician concludes the prince's body is fine, but he'll still prescribe a restorative tonic to help rebuild energy. James expresses great joy and gratitude. Noticing Weiss heading for the door to leave, the bodyguard expresses his desire to see him off. The old man replies it's unnecessary and requests James remain with the prince. Weiss departs the building, lost in thought. It seems extraordinarily strange how dramatically a person could transform. Long ago, when Ash was merely a child, the advisor was convinced they would simply dispose of him given his weak constitution and complete lack of martial arts knowledge. Now, considering the state of his physiology, Weiss believes the protagonist possesses greater potential for learning the arts than the other princes. The doctor turns, glancing back at the house. He remembers Ash is still the Lord's illegitimate son, yet admits the boy seems to only pretend indifference to his situation while actively investigating everything. The white advisor clasps his hands behind his back, deciding that if the Lord secretly helped him, there's no need to advertise it. He concludes the newly opening academy will certainly become quite noisy. The prince lying in bed sighs with relief, not believing Weiss understood anything. He looks at James and acknowledges he's alive thanks to his bodyguard as well. Gazing at the man's back, Ash realizes that although Nano healed him, circumstances would have been entirely different if James hadn't arrived in time. He rises to thank the bodyguard, but the man holds out an open palm and apologizes. James pinches his nose, looks away, and hints the young master should bathe first. The protagonist remembers his smell again and agrees with the man's assessment. Ash climbs into the bath, adjusting his hair and mentally addressing Nano, which immediately responds. Placing his hand on the bath's edge, the prince reminds the mechanism it previously stated his body was in a self-healing state. He wonders what kind of damage can be repaired. The mechanical voice replies all internal and external damage caused by external sources can be fixed. The boy grows bored as Nano explains that blood loss or decapitation would require longer healing periods since they necessitate cell division. He complains the mechanism keeps saying things too difficult to understand. Examining his hand, Ash hopes nothing bad will happen if he tests it slightly. He picks up a knife and brings it to his palm. The protagonist cuts his hand and winces in pain. Nano announces activation of self-healing state in his left palm from the knife wound. The prince stares at his recently injured palm in amazement. The cut has already healed, leaving only traces of blood. Ash finds even that has stopped. He abruptly slides into the water, splashing it everywhere. Sinking until the water reaches his nose, the protagonist admits to himself that seeing it with his own eyes makes it hard to believe. But now he knows how it functions. Continuing to sit in the bathhouse, Ash asks Nano if it's true he'll be able to use all the functions described in the information previously transferred to his head. The mechanism confirms its owner can utilize everything specified in the instructions. The guy feels pleased with this answer, deciding to test them after bathing. Emerging from the bath, Ash cannot help but notice his magnificent physique. The prince wraps himself in a towel while drying himself with another, staring at his reflection. This makes no sense. He cannot understand how his body became so muscular and fit. The boy believes Nano accomplished this too, and he's not mistaken, since the mechanism truly did reconstruct his body. An old maid arrives, announcing she's here to dress Ash. The protagonist tears himself from thoughts about muscle rebuilding and permits the old woman to begin. Nano notes that although science knows creating something from nothing is impossible, There's nothing difficult about reconstructing an existing body part. The prince spreads his arms while the maid ties his belt. Listening to the mechanism, the guy realizes this choice of words exceeds his understanding. He admits that when listening to Nano, he gets the impression everything he learned before was completely meaningless, despite trying very hard to study. The protagonist thinks deeply and asks the mechanism for permission to call it Nano instead of its long designation. Nano immediately registers the new name. The prince sadly notes it's not fun to be around. Ash enters his office and begins contemplating what to do next. His inner voice suggests finding a book and flipping through the pages. Standing before the cabinet, the guy clarifies whether it's true he only needs to flip through it. Nano confirms this. Ash removes one of the books from the shelf, thinking the only texts here even remotely related to martial arts concern blood points and Kai, as well as the teaching of the 3 jewels, a breathing technique aimed at training body and mind. Unfortunately, even studying your entire life, reaching even the lowest level is extremely difficult. The prince decides it would be better to read about blood points. Opening the cover, Ash tells Nano he's starting. The mechanism confirms it's ready. The protagonist begins rapidly turning pages, feeling like he's acquiring vast amounts of knowledge. Closing the book after flipping through it without missing a page, he hears Nano politely inform him it successfully scanned the book Blood Flow and requests permission to attempt transferring the information into the user's brain. Placing the book on the table, Ash thinks about the meaning of scan and realizes Nano means it copied this information. The mechanism confirms and repeats the consent request. The prince agrees. Many lightning bolts form around him in an unpleasant experience. The protagonist then feels like he's absorbing streams of information from the book and screams. The textbook rests back on the table where Ash places his sparkling hands. He breathes heavily and covers his mouth. Nano promises he'll soon grow accustomed to it. The prince removes his hand from his mouth, asking if the mechanism cares about him. The Nano Machine replies it's simply noting the effect. The boy concludes Nano is emotionless and possesses no feelings whatsoever. Sitting at the table, he asks what he should do now. The mechanical voice replies that if the master wishes to apply acquired knowledge, he should simply think about a certain topic for it to appear. The prince rests his cheek on his hand and thinks about blood spots. He begins explaining that blood points play an important role in human blood circulation and can also simply be called blood spots. He knows there are 2 types, one that paralyzes and one that can kill, and what will definitely happen if you stimulate the paralysis point on the human body. Ash abruptly opens his eyes as realization floods over him. The protagonist laughs, not understanding how this is possible. He considers it insane because this isn't just memorization. On the contrary, he can fully comprehend the content. Nano surprises the master by explaining it transferred the information after correcting errors in the book. Ash becomes interested in what these errors were and what was written incorrectly. The mechanism states that according to information stored in its program, it corrected errors about blood points. The guy smiles dreamily and with determination, unable to believe he can now study and perfect martial arts faster than anyone else. His smile widens and his lips tremble. The prince knows candidates from the 6 clans have been studying many techniques since they could walk. Walking outside, even after watching the other princes, he still couldn't understand the 3 jewels method. Clenching his hands into fists, he's heard there are many of them in the Magic Academy. Bending his arm at the elbow and raising his fist, Ash decides that with this ability, he'll become stronger faster than anyone in the academy. He vows to make this his goal. Meanwhile, in the successor candidate's quarters in the southern castle of the demon cult, the Pagan House, a long-haired boy turns toward the wall. He states he sent everyone to eliminate one boy, so he can't believe all 5 of them are dead. Laughing at the speaker's words behind his back, he decides it makes no sense. The speaker raises his head and assumes someone secretly helped Ash, calling Prince Jack by name. The heir becomes very angry since the killer has no right to call him by name at his own whim. The speaker must apologize, lowering his head to the floor again. Jack looks away, annoyed since he thought that because Ash was a bastard with low-class blood, it would be easy to kill him. However, it turned out the boy had a few trump cards. Frowning, Jack thinks angrily he even tried to eliminate that bodyguard. Now he believes there's someone else protecting the protagonist, possibly his father. The guy slowly raises his hand, clenching it into a fist, and with an expression of anger and a smile on his face, decides he'll have to kill Ash at the Magic Academy itself. The sun rises over the protagonist's estate. The prince lies in bed with his hands behind his head, looking thoughtful, unable to sleep at night due to nerves. Opening the window and noticing it's already morning, he looks outside and declares he'll be entering the academy today. In the yard, Ash sees James training with a dagger. The bodyguard practices combat techniques, naked to the waist. The protagonist leans on the windowsill, thinking whether it would be better to master James's dagger technique, but immediately rejects the idea. He looks ahead confidently and decides the people watching them won't just leave things as they are. When his mother died, Ash swore he wouldn't learn martial arts until entering the academy. Suddenly, Nano addresses him, distracting him from his thoughts. While the prince watches the bodyguard, the mechanism offers to scan James's movements. The protagonist can't help but be surprised. Clarifying whether Nano can scan other people's movements, he receives confirmation. The guy contemplates the possibility of the mechanism copying James's bodyguard training and transferring it all to his head. Nano explains it's doable. He also states that in addition to this, the program contains many techniques of other martial arts he can pass to the master. He says he can even transfer this knowledge right now. Ash is shocked. Looking at the bodyguard, he cannot decide if it would be acceptable to borrow James's technique without permission. The protagonist continues watching the training, thinking that after lunch he should go to the academy without any regrets. The guy decides he doesn't have time to think about protecting himself, so he asks Nano to scan James. Movement scan activates. The bodyguard continues honing his skills. Ash stares at him intently, studying his new abilities. The bodyguard swings the dagger, lunges. The prince continues studying, still looking out the window. Nano informs him the scan took approximately half an hour and copying the movements is complete. The protagonist winces in pain in his head as information transfer to the user's brain begins. He sits on the floor by the window. Transfer completes, and Ash notices this time was easier than yesterday. The protagonist realizes something and doesn't understand how this could be. He laughs, thinking how this is possible. The prince rushes from the window, then grabs the sheath and begins removing the weapon. The guy thinks he now also possesses James's bodyguard dagger technique. Looking at the open window and remembering he must be careful so James doesn't notice, he closes the shutters. Then Ash assumes a fighting stance and relaxes. He opens his eyes abruptly. The ground crumbles. The prince makes quick movements with the dagger in his hand. He stops in the lunge and is amazed because he managed to perform almost the same as James's bodyguard after 20 years of training. Examining his hand, Ash tries to believe the scan allowed him to completely bypass aspects like daily training, holding poses, and honing movements. The boy doesn't understand everything, so Nano explains that when motion scanning activated, muscle contraction analysis was also performed. He also asks the master for permission to transfer information to the muscles. The protagonist didn't know this also needed to be done. He feels sharp pain in his head. The mechanism didn't have time to warn what would happen if he didn't accept the conditions. Ash drops the dagger and falls to his knees, screaming in pain. His whole body suddenly twists with pain, so he asks Nano what's happening to him. Trembling, the protagonist tries to get up from the floor. The mechanism answers that with the help of long-term training, the body builds up certain muscles necessary for specific movements, but the master's body isn't developed enough for this. That's why Ash's muscles were damaged. The prince knows he's doing something like a transfer, but is indignant that Nano explains everything in such complex language. With difficulty, the boy finally sits back on the bed. The mechanism reports implementing a simplification of language to match the user's level. Ash feels humiliated after these words. He grabs his heart with a shaking hand. Nano announces the simplification is complete and says the master hasn't trained for as long as James, and even if his brain mastered the information, his body cannot adjust. He adds Ash's muscles need stimulation so the movements become habitual for the body, and only after information transfer will he be able to fully use these movements. The guy sitting and looking at closed windows admits it's much easier than before, but still difficult for him to understand. Nano suggests lowering the language value to the lowest level. Ash irritably repeats he almost understood everything. Breathing heavily with his face covered in sweat, the protagonist asks if the pain will disappear if he performs the muscle transfer. The mechanism confirms this and asks if the prince wants to start the transfer. Ash worries it will hurt a lot. The mechanism reports there were 1,350,000 recorded cases of consciousness loss caused by muscle transfer. The prince clenches his robe with his fingers since he's not sure he can handle this. He slumps his shoulders. Nano notices his master wants to try without anesthesia. The protagonist asks that if he cannot endure it, to return to the option with anesthesia. The Nano Machine accepts the request and begins the transfer, accompanied by lightning covering the protagonist's body. Ash relaxes since he only feels tickling, although he was so excited. Then suddenly he feels unbearable pain. The prince clenches his teeth and screams. Nano announces the introduction of anesthesia. The protagonist sighs in relief after that. He falls on the bed. James cooks in the kitchen at that time. He tries the dish and likes it. The man thinks he's on par with the nearby masters. He continues chopping vegetables, wondering if he should cook something special today. The bodyguard decides to stick with cooking the usual dishes the prince liked. He remembers nostalgically it's been 5 years since he learned to cook for Ash. In the past, James wasn't even a good cook. Before her death, the protagonist's mother asked the bodyguard to look after her son. James returns to cooking. He notes it's been 5 years since Lady Nora died from poisoned food. Today, Prince Ash is going to enter the academy, so the bodyguard mentally asks Nora to grant her son protection from the sky so he can survive and enjoy food again. James hears the protagonist scream. The bodyguard drops his cleaver. He bursts into the prince's room and asks if he's okay. The prince lies on the bed. James doesn't understand what's wrong with him. He touches the boy's pulse. The man thinks judging by the protagonist's pulse he feels everything is fine. The bodyguard tries to figure out what he did to make this happen. He sees marks burned into the wooden floor. James touches one of them. Kneeling in front of the marks, the man concludes Prince Ash has been watching his training for at least 2 years. The bodyguard smiles, shocked the guy only watched him for 2 years and already achieved what he achieved in 20 years of training. The protagonist's eyes widen. Nano says the requested transfer to muscle fibers is complete and stops the anesthesia. The guy stands up and takes a sharp breath, trying to catch his breath. Scratching himself, Ash decides never to repeat something like that again. The mechanism adds it simply warned the master in advance. The protagonist notices he's lying on the bed and assumes James came. He gets off it and picks up the dagger. Straightening up, the prince thinks it should be painless to use the dagger technique now. The Nano Machine agrees that due to muscle transmission, the master has the same fiber structure as people who've been practicing the necessary movements for 20 years. Ash closes his eyes and concentrates. He assumes a fighting stance and holds the knife out in front of him. Then he makes a powerful lunge. The guy realizes in this lunge he used the same techniques as before, but the strength and accuracy increased. The protagonist feels happy, thinking this feeling when he cuts the air is excellent. Ash then makes many training strikes. He tosses the weapon and twirls it in the air. The guy catches the knife with a reverse grip and makes a strike. He concludes this is all that's needed for the first formation. The prince steps forward for the second formation. He ducks and steps loudly on the floor, causing dust to rise in the room. The protagonist is surprised. Looking at the broken parquet, Ash notes this is bad. Even though he didn't use the light style, he still left marks. Crouching down to the smoking mark from his foot, the prince adds he's already mastered the heavy style. He doesn't want his bodyguard James to see this. While the boy sits on the floor, James shouts to him that breakfast is ready. The protagonist jumps up from the floor, worried and not knowing what to do because the marks don't disappear even when he presses on them. The bodyguard opens the door slightly with a tray in his hand. Ash moves the table and says he's very hungry today. James is surprised because usually the young master ate by the window. The boy points to the table and explains that since he'll be gone for a long time, he'd like to have a snack in the center of the room. He smiles nervously, hoping James doesn't notice. The protagonist looks at the tray and sees fried bok choy with pork and an egg on top of rice, his favorite dishes. The protagonist is ready to cry. He realizes James cares about him, and since today is the day he enters the academy, this could be the last breakfast the bodyguard makes for him. Ash is angered by Nano's sudden comment warning that a sudden change in emotional background causes hydrochloric acid release into the esophagus. It adds saliva production has increased and advises swallowing food with saliva to reduce acidity level. The prince urges the Nano Machine to stop talking nonsense and keep quiet. The mechanism temporarily turns on silent mode. The protagonist begins absorbing the food, intending to eat everything without a trace. James smiles silently. The guy continues quickly throwing food into his mouth. The bodyguard asks him to eat slowly, otherwise his stomach might get upset. Ash takes his advice. After a while, he puts down his chopsticks and declares it was a great breakfast, praising James. The bodyguard seems to have decided to ask something. He closes his eyes and inquires when the young gentleman mastered his dagger technique. The prince becomes agitated, asking James what he's talking about. The man takes and moves the table. Ash is shocked the mark from his foot is now visible. James looks at it and realizes it was left by the first movement into the second formation of his technique. The mark is much clearer than the one he saw before, convincing the bodyguard his eyes hadn't deceived him. The prince despairs because stealing someone else's martial arts technique is taboo in Murim. He's committed a crime by stealing someone else's technique using Nano, and he has nothing to justify it with, even if James hated him. However, the bodyguard sits down next to him and smiles, praising the guy for what he's done. The man assures him there's nothing wrong with the young master training in secret because he's his bodyguard. He admits that if not for the oath given to the 6 clans, he would have taught Ash this earlier. The protagonist cries from such kind words. James hands him paper, and when asked what it is, he explains it's an energy expenditure method for the light style of the dagger technique. The prince doesn't understand why the bodyguard is giving it to him. James looks the boy in the eyes and says he wants to give him some advice on how to master the light style. However, he believes there will be many things at the academy much better than what he can offer, so he asks him to master it. Ash takes the note in his hands and drops a tear on it. He can no longer hold back his tears. James tactfully remains silent. He remembers how the young gentleman promised him at his mother's deathbed he would never cry again. That was the last time he cried. The bodyguard takes the tray with empty plates. He notices 5 years have passed since Lady Nora passed away. During that time, the man clenched his teeth and put up with the prince's character, but he's still a boy who needs parental care. Walking toward the exit, the bodyguard stops in front of the door. Without turning to Ash, James says he won't be able to stay with him after enrollment in the academy and permits him to cry today. The man finally recommends staying strong from now on. The guy lowers his head and, without stopping crying, thanks James. The door closes from the other side. The prince wipes away his tears. He swallows and decides that from today on, he cannot allow himself to be afraid or doubt. While the bodyguard returns to the kitchen, Ash concludes for himself that even if his mother is no longer there, he still has a place to return to. Many people gather at the academy gates during the day. The applicants line up in the square. They begin talking and discussing whether all the clans gathered and how many people gathered here. According to their rough estimates, there are about 1,000. The guy in the purple headband admits that now that he's standing at the academy, he's beginning to get nervous. His neighbor with the gray headband explains that since this is a competition between the heirs, as part of a minor clan, they're forced to line up. Finally, the one who will greet the contenders shows up. He notices with irritation that the people who came are very noisy. A man with maroon hair comes out to the crowd and angrily declares the place is such a mess he can't see any hint of their souls, calling everyone idiots. This man burns with anger. He's outraged that the contenders came here without due determination, knowing this could be the place of their death. His name is Ben, and he's the left bodyguard with the title of Fire King. A strong wind arises in the square. The people in the crowd recognize the left bodyguard by his red hair. They know Ben is one of the 10 strongest of the magic cult, or even 5. The man smirks and is surprised to see children in the front row. He assumes these 6 are the heirs of the 6 clans. The guy in the dark robe represents the Dark Clan. He's number 1, and his name is Claude. The Sword Clan sent a sly-looking guy who received number 2, Jeffrey. For some reason, Jack is very irritated by the others. He's the heir of the Creek Clan and has number 3. The Poison Clan is represented by the silent guy, number 4, Romeo. The honor of the Blade Clan is defended by number 5, a guy with a warm cloak, Alex. The Sound Clan put forward the only female heir among the main clans, number 6, Maria. Ben is about to move on to number 7, but surprisingly he's nowhere to be found. Ash frowns and can't understand why his name badge is missing. The man handing them out throws up his hands and says he doesn't see the 7th prince's badge. He adds the guy will have to wait until he finds it. The protagonist isn't very pleased when he realizes this is the work of one of the 6 clans because they don't want him to stand in the same row with them. He tells the distributor he understands everything and agrees to wait. The protagonist leans against the wall while the others receive their badges. He decides nothing good will come of quarreling with them from the start. Ash hangs his head, remembering these are the same people who tried to kill him at every opportunity. He figures they'll finish him off as soon as they see him there. There are still many people present in the square. After all, the boy came to the academy after countless dishonorable attempts by princes, and so he's going to become stronger than anyone else in this demon academy. The candidates stand in neat rows. Ash looks at the entire huge line and admits it would be difficult to get to the front. The crowd mocks him because he has a black badge with a number 7 on it. This means he's an heir candidate who doesn't belong to any of the 6 clans. People discuss rumors that Ash doesn't know any martial arts styles and believe because of this he'll be the first to fail. The protagonist makes an offended face and folds his arms. He understands what they're whispering even if he can't hear them. He decides to just let the others laugh at him. Ben notices the protagonist standing in the distance and thinks it's funny to see him at the very end. The left guard smiles and decides this bastard child of the Lord chose a funny way to gain attention. The sound of a horn is heard. The crowd gathered in the square hears it and perks up. This sound means those whom everyone was waiting for will soon arrive. Upon seeing the Lord, the candidates stop chatting. The sound of footsteps becomes audible. 4 more figures are coming out to the people. The crowd seems to forget how to breathe while looking at them. In front walks a man with a small beard and mustache. He's followed by a man in a mask and a man with a katana. The Lord walks up the steps to the throne. The man with the katana trips and accidentally hits Ben in the shoulder. Ben realizes with irritation that this drunkard came in shabby clothes. Hank, the right guard, holds a flask of alcohol in his hand. He really doesn't like the fact the left guard is staring at him. When the masked man turns around and glares at the two of them, they fall silent. Sam, the head bodyguard, has long gray hair. He orders Hank and Ben to be quiet. The Lord sits on the throne and places his hands on the armrests. This man has an incredible aura of a ruler. He's also one of the 5 strongest in the murim cult, and his name is Solomon. The candidates immediately feel pressure from him. In the ranks, someone complains that Solomon's presence is so oppressive he can't raise his head. However, the people decide this befits the Lord. Ash thinks that this man is his father. Sam waves his hand and gives the order to maintain silence. The crowd immediately freezes. The head bodyguard bows to the Lord and says everything is ready. Solomon stands up, looking at the crowd seriously. The Lord begins emitting a purple aura. He declares all the candidates here are responsible for the future of this cult and greets them. The voice is so clear the candidates are afraid. They feel Kai for the first time. The protagonist also tenses up. He notices Solomon's voice sounds like he's just talking, but it's very clear and distinct. The Lord shouts to the crowd that in this place, the teachings and shackles become the strength of the cult. The candidates raise their fists in the air and shout in support. Solomon's bodyguards bow, and Sam praises the Lord for his good work. The people are inspired and ready to fight for the sake of the demonic cult. Solomon, however, doesn't show any emotion. He glances to the side. There, behind everyone, the man notices Prince Ash. Their eyes meet for a moment. Then the Lord turns away. The protagonist doesn't look away. His father is gone, and the boy seems upset. The protagonist met him for the first time, and all he got was his cold eyes. He raises his head proudly as he hadn't expected anything, since this man hadn't shown up even after his mother died. Ben announces that now that the master's welcoming speech is over, they can begin. Some of the candidates continue chatting, ignoring him. The left bodyguard grinds his teeth in anger. He shouts at the frightened crowd for not standing properly. Ben is furious, and it's almost physical. Looking at the offenders, he notes standing properly isn't that difficult and urges them to listen carefully. Folding his arms over his chest, Ben explains that training at the academy will last 4 years and consist of 6 stages, after each of which the guys will have a test and only one chance to pass it. The candidates begin to worry when they hear about one chance. They realize if they can't complete the task on the first try, they'll fail. The left bodyguard grins when he realizes his words reached the audience. He confirms whoever doesn't pass will be expelled immediately. One guy raises his hand and says he has a question. This man is the confident Jeffrey. Ben looks at him, pauses, then becomes indignant because no one allowed such a freak to ask questions. Jeffrey is shocked. He gets angry, thinking he hadn't heard Ben or... The left guard flares even more. He wonders if the heir of the Sword Clan really has a problem with him calling him a freak and adds everyone present should have known that from the moment they were enrolled in the academy, they would lose all privileges of the 6 clans. Furiously, Ben asks if Jeffrey really wants to be expelled before the competition even began. Claude and Jack can hardly contain their laughter. Jeffrey feels ashamed. He bows to Ben and apologizes. The man puts his hand on his hip and notes what the guy wanted to ask is obvious. The candidates listen attentively and excitedly. Ben knows they think one chance for 6 stages is unfair, but he promises whoever advances to the next stage will receive a special reward. The left bodyguard says the first reward is the Black Dragon Stone. Ash doesn't know what it is, so he listens to the guys in front of him discussing it. They say if it's the same Black Dragon Stone, it's most likely a healing stone that allows the one who uses it to gain 20 years comparable to Kai. The guy in yellow asks if this means if you pass all the stages and earn 6 stones, you could gain 120 years. He thinks that would be similar to the level of high professionalism. The man in gray replies that in this case, it's not so because according to rumors, the more the stone is used, the less effective it becomes. Also, it's difficult to absorb it all at once. The protagonist looks desperate. He has to go through 6 stages but currently has no Kai. However, he thinks if he passes, he'll be able to increase it several times. Ben spreads his hands and says the second incentive is a book of martial arts secrets. He notes all candidates know martial arts, so they should understand the importance of such books. The man adds the library of the Demon Academy is located on 5 floors, and each time the guys pass the test, they get access to 1 floor. Ben explains that depending on the efforts made, students will have the opportunity to study the secrets of the 6 clans and even gain access to secret manuals on different martial arts. The candidates are inspired. One of them begins dreaming about being able to study divine physiology. His neighbor adds that then it would be possible to become one of the murim masters. Ash becomes more serious. He decides that in terms of survival, books on martial arts are more important than Kai. Ben points out with a wicked expression that most of those present won't make it to the 5th floor even if they're resurrected, so he urges them to stop dreaming about it. In the absolute silence, Hank takes a sip from his flask. He tears himself away from the alcohol and thinks that when it comes to moralizing and immediately after demotivation, Ben is the best. He personally doesn't like any of it. The left bodyguard is ready to move on to the 3rd and final incentive. The candidates are interested because he states this is that they'll be able to achieve a rank they didn't have before. Jeffrey looks behind him. Now he understands why they don't have ranks and privileges here, and that everything will change after entering the academy, where from now on only the strongest will survive. Ben closes his eyes and waves his hands. He says each time they pass a stage, they'll receive a rank: low warrior rank for the 1st stage, middle rank for the 2nd, high rank for the 3rd, team leader rank for the 4th stage, and clan leader for the 5th. The man decides to skip the 6th stage, which he doesn't think the candidates will have to go through. He warns that most students won't even pass 3 stages, no matter what they do. Folding his arms again, the left bodyguard remarks that despite this, it would still be a shame for high-ranking clan members to become low-ranking here. Hank looks away. Inside, he doubts the 6th stage can be called a test since it's almost impossible to pass. In the centuries the academy has existed, not even a dozen people have failed this test. Ben adds that if the candidates can pass the high levels, their rank will be taken into account. He says everyone will start with the rank of cadet, but later they'll differ. Ash frowns intensely. If survival had been his main concern before, now survival means rising in rank. The man exhales, places his palm on the guard of his blade, and concludes he's done explaining. He announces with a smirk that everyone will now split into groups to move into dorms, and then the first test will begin. The protagonist doesn't know how to react at all. When the guy comes to his senses, he's in shock. The people around him can't believe their ears that the first test is about to begin. They think it's unfair. The candidates continue whispering, not understanding how they could already have their first test. They thought they had to learn something first and are already thinking about what they'll do if they're expelled. Ben demands they be quiet. He throws his hand forward and repeats that those who fail the test will be expelled since they don't even deserve to be called low-ranking warriors. Hank notices his partner is very fidgety. Ben shouts that the first test is an assessment of basic skills, and candidates will need to have at least a basic level of Kai to become a warrior of the academy. He states those without Kai will be redirected to agricultural, commercial, or service industries, so he urges them to prepare to die. Ash swears in disappointment. Then he shakes his head, remembering they need people to do menial work, so he asks him not to try too hard. The protagonist clenches his fists tightly. Now he understands why the people of the 6 clans made him swear he wouldn't learn Kai. The guy is ready to despair because if he doesn't pass now, he'll become part of the lowest clan of the cult. If that happens, anyone will try to kill him. Jack meanwhile chuckles. He looks back at Ash with a smile. Jack doesn't know whose idea it was to require such an oath, but he admits it's a good one because it'll save him from having to kill the bastard himself. Something catches his attention. A woman in a beautiful robe walks in front of the candidates, accompanied by subordinates. She holds a stringed musical instrument in her hands. She's the leader of one of the 5 oldest clans of the demon cult, the Sound Clan Hannah. The woman climbs the stairs to the bodyguards. Ben points at her and announces this person, Hannah, will oversee the first test. He spreads his hands and honestly admits this test is very simple. The man, however, warns that if the candidates fail here, they'll never be able to become even a low-ranking warrior. The people look at the leader of the Sound Clan and wonder what test requires her presence. They come to some conclusion and cover their ears with their hands. Ash doesn't understand why they do this. Ben chuckles and points out that if the 5th Elder were to actually emit her waves of musical energy, they, the little ones, wouldn't have a chance to resist. He urges the people not to worry as she'll have everything under control, adding that if they're lucky, they can endure it even without Kai. Ash curses inwardly when he realizes they're about to experience a wave of musical energy. Hannah begins emitting energy. She says that even with a small amount of Kai, the candidates should be able to resist for a minute. The left bodyguard waves his hand and shouts that those who can remain conscious for a minute will pass the first test. He then announces the beginning. The leader of the Sound Clan runs her fingers along the strings. Her aura immediately fills the area. The energy reaches the candidates, and some tolerate it worse than others. The protagonist is afraid of this power. People around him fall to the ground. Some are sick, others complain of chest pain. The sound is audible even if you cover your ears. Ben looks at the fallen candidates and notes that, as expected, those from the small clans have already lost consciousness. He admits that in comparison, the representatives of the 6 clans and other children of the high-ranking clans are still holding up. Jack smiles and thinks it's just a tickle for his ears. Hannah plucks the strings again. Jack continues to smile. The candidates from the 6 clans have been taking medicine since they were children, which allowed them to accumulate enough Kai. He assumes Ash, who has no Kai, is already lying on the ground. Hannah plucks the strings harder. The representatives of the 6 clans frown. They feel something strange. The leader of the clan of sound continues. Maria, who can hardly bear the melody, notices Hannah's plucking is getting faster. The woman is emitting more and more energy, but it's unclear why. More and more candidates writhe in pain and cover their ears with their hands. Hannah looks ahead angrily, not understanding why he hasn't fallen yet. She really doesn't like that Ash isn't giving up. The protagonist looks at his hands, not really understanding himself. He sees half the people are already on the ground. The guy looks at them, assumes they're suffering from internal wounds, and wonders why he himself is okay. Suddenly, Nano informs him it has detected powerful high and low frequency waves coming from the instrument, and since there's a possibility of serious damage to the master's body, it activated the emergency protection mode to block the influence of the sound waves. Ash realizes this mechanism made it so he can't hear the sound waves. Nano confirms it temporarily froze the prince's body's ability to perceive sounds. The protagonist asks why he can then hear Nano's voice. The answer is the information is transmitted directly to his brain. Ash admits it's difficult. Hannah looks at him with a burning gaze. The guy breaks out in a cold sweat. The woman's eyes seem simply enormous. He asks Nano to block that terrifying gaze, and Nano offers to suspend his visual perception. Ash decides to be patient. Ben glances at Hannah and feels the 5th Elder starting to lose her patience. He becomes serious when he thinks the history of the Sound Clan is much stronger than before. The man thinks such a level of energy should be too much for those with less than 20 years of Kai. As he expected, Ash is the reason for this. He's heard this guy has no Kai, but now doubts it because the protagonist is holding up extremely well. Ben smiles and admits This is the first time since he got his place at the academy that he's seen the first test go so excitingly. He wonders how long the bastard can hold out. One of the candidates points out to another that his ears are bleeding, but the same can be said about him. The representatives of the elder clans try to hold on, but not all of them succeed. Even with 20 years of Kai, they're having a hard time, but they convince themselves they have to endure it a little longer because the clan's honor is at stake. Jack sits in the lotus position and has no problems, but he still doesn't understand why the fifth elder is playing so hard. The representative of the Brook clan notices something is wrong with Hannah's expression. He assumes she's angry. Jack turns around to check his sudden assumption. He's shocked. Romeo wonders why he's so surprised. Maria thinks they shouldn't look behind those standing, but this is different. All 6 of them look at Ash, who is standing visible after all the other candidates have collapsed. The representatives of the major clans are amazed this bastard without Kai managed to stay well, and besides, he's not tired at all. Ash himself doesn't understand how he deserved such attention. Jack clenches his teeth in anger. He realizes with horror this freak has Kai. The protagonist looks up and asks Nano if he's right in thinking the boys ahead and the fifth elder are furious. The mechanism begins analyzing movements of facial muscles. It counts bewilderment, surprise, irritation, and anger from Hannah's muscle movements. Ash is stunned because his hearing is disabled. He doesn't know what's going on, but he can see their hostility. It's obvious to the boy their pride is hurt since they thought he had no Kai, and now see he's still holding on. Everyone around him is bleeding from their ears. Ash knows if he passes the first test in good condition, they won't believe him if he says he has no Kai. He thinks, frowns, and asks if Nano can give him an internal injury. The guy grabs his stomach. The mechanism clarifies whether by internal injury he means damage to his internal organs, and the protagonist confirms. Nano confirms it's possible, but doesn't recommend doing so. The guy confidently continues to resist the sound. He tells the Nano Machine it doesn't matter and urges it, as soon as the performance is over, to cause internal damage and make him vomit blood. Nano accepts the master's order to cause damage to internal organs. Hannah is angry, realizing almost a minute has passed. She looks at the bastard who isn't even 15 years old and can't believe he withstood it so easily. The head of the Sound clan bites her lip and decides she can't leave it like this. Glancing at Ash from under her brows, her pride doesn't allow her to stop. Hannah begins to play many times stronger. She suggests the protagonist try to withstand the performance, which will require half of her body's strength. Ben notices something is wrong and turns to Hannah as it's dangerous. Romeo winces in pain. He's started bleeding. The left bodyguard tries to stop the fifth elder from making things worse. The head of the Sound clan comes to her senses and lets go of the strings. The energy from the square immediately dissipates. The candidate struggles to get up from the ground when it's finally over. Hank sits nearby with a flask. He notes if Hannah had added a little more power, everyone would have failed the first test. The right bodyguard can't believe the fifth elder lost control. Hannah sadly sits down on a chair and begins reproaching herself for what she did. The woman realizes she hadn't been able to control her anger at the bastard and had used half of her power. She grits her teeth and decides all this is because of the enemy of the 6 clans because of Ash. The protagonist stands there unmoving. He trembles slightly, then reaches up to cover his mouth. The boy coughs up blood, causing both Ben and Hannah to notice him. Jack turns around, surprised as well. He honestly doesn't understand what's going on. The protagonist falls to his knees, still spitting up blood. The people around him begin to worry. They think he's dying since he's vomiting so much blood. Ash covers his mouth with his hand, holding back the blood. He's angry at Nano. The mechanism says the program has been executed as ordered. It explains it damaged 30% of the body's organs, causing maximum bleeding. The boy is still shaking. He mentally scolds Nano and calls him a psychopath since he thinks he's dying. Ash is struck again. He coughs up more blood. Ben suddenly jumps toward him. He tenses up because he's worried about himself. If the guy dies because of the test, he'll be responsible. The left bodyguard knows Ash isn't from the 6 clans, but he's not going to let a member of the leadership line die. He runs up to the protagonist, grabs his hand, and asks if he's okay. Nano registers dizziness caused by the loss of 7% of blood and activates the self-healing mode of internal organs and blood supply. Ben shouts at the bleeding guy, but he can't answer yet. Ash goes limp in the man's arms. The left bodyguard calls him an idiot who could just give up. The mechanism warns the master he's in a dangerous state. The protagonist doesn't move. He only asks Nano to wait a little longer. Ben picks him up, feels his pulse, and wonders how much Kai he has since he endured so much. The result shocks him. The left guard looks at the protagonist, whose hand he holds, in confusion when he finds out he has no Kai. Looking at Ash covered in his own blood, Ben thinks he's truly crazy. There were bad rumors about the 7th prince, but the man didn't expect much. The left guard doesn't know how to react to this. He can't believe the protagonist passed the first test with only mental endurance and willpower. Raising his palm, the left bodyguard's subordinates immediately appear. Glancing over his back at the 2 warriors, Ben orders them to carry him to the infirmary. The warriors accept the order. The man continues looking at Ash, who is placed on a stretcher. The boy doesn't lose consciousness. He asks Nano to heal him faster. Hannah watches this in silence. She shocked the child who withstood the waves of energy like it was nothing is now in such a state. The 5th elder is afraid to imagine how much internal damage he received. Ben quickly returns to his seat and tells the Sound Clan leader it was too much. The woman hadn't expected him to appear. She turns to Ben and asks what it was. The left bodyguard closes his eyes, sighs, and explains she almost killed Ash. Hannah lowers her head and asks if the child had any Kai. Ben replies he had none. The woman is shocked. Ben crosses his arms and explains he gave the protagonist a little stimulation but found no Kai at all. This means the protagonist kept his oath. Hannah jumps up from her seat and loudly protests, not understanding how this is possible. She can't believe Ash withstood so much of her energy without Kai. Many of the candidates are still unable to stand up. The 5th elder states that if he had no Kai, he would have passed out like the other children. Ben looks at her without turning his head and says the guy has very serious wounds. He adds the protagonist held out only due to will. Hannah smiles hysterically. She thinks that's impossible. The man repeats it's only willpower and admits it's already scary. Without taking his eyes off the head of the Sound Clan, he thinks if Ash hadn't been born out of wedlock, he would have wanted to raise him as one of his students, but he knows nothing good will come from resisting the 6 clans. Hank takes a large sip of alcohol and hits his leg with the flask. He stands up, wipes the spilled liquid from his chin, and remarks that the fact Ash held out due to will is funny. Ben looks at him, says it's none of his business, and advises him to hide in the corner and continue drinking. The right bodyguard pretends to be offended and admits he'd been going to do so even without Ben's instructions. The left bodyguard calls for the drunk to finally disappear. Hank sarcastically remarks that the guy who would have been dead by now if he hadn't been a bodyguard likes to pick on him. Ben gets angry and points out to the guy who can talk even with his mouth full of alcohol that Hank, if he hadn't been a bodyguard, would have been a corpse that day too. This hurts the drunk's pride. A physically tangible tension arises between the two of them. The candidates feel powerful energy. Streams of power are directed from their side to Ben and Hank. Jack and the rest of the main clans begin to worry, looking at the right and left bodyguards. Stones are about to fly up from the ground, but the streams of energy die down. Hank clicks his tongue in displeasure. He leaves with a smile, not forgetting his drink, calling Ben some bad names at the end. The left bodyguard only chuckles in response. The drunk walks past the candidates lying on the ground and scolds them for how they look from just a wave of energy. He concludes modern children have no courage at all. Hank frowns and seems to sober up when he compares these students to someone. He thinks of the seventh prince. The man smiles confidently and admits to himself he likes this guy. All the candidates in the square are still recovering from the events that just happened. Dr. Klaus of the Demon Academy is filling out paperwork in the infirmary on the second floor of the main building. Someone shouts from behind the door, "There's a patient," and Klaus is surprised. He eagerly opens the door. The doctor literally beams when he realizes they've brought him a real patient. He's happy and sheds a tear because he can't believe he received a patient on the very first day. Klaus is happy his thoughts about this Demon Academy being the best were confirmed. The warriors who brought Ash to him don't understand such behavior at all. One of them has heard Klaus is Graham's student and that he's obsessed with medical practice. The soldiers carry the protagonist further. Klaus realizes now isn't the time to act like this and points to the infirmary. When the boy is placed on a cot, the doctor is surprised. He has no idea how difficult the test must be to be in such a state. Klaus points to Ash and asks if he was hit in the stomach. The warrior shakes his head and says he only received internal injuries. The doctor is even more surprised. The man who brought the boy says he doesn't have Nigong and conveys the left bodyguard's request to take special care of him. Klaus assumes a thoughtful pose. He's seen many cases in 10 years of training with the teacher, but this is the first time he's seen so much blood from internal wounds. The warriors are about to leave. The older one says that since they've carried Ash to the infirmary, it's time for them to go back. Klaus doesn't detain them. The younger soldier takes one last look at the protagonist. His colleague turns around and asks why he's hesitating when they're in a hurry. The warrior replies everything is fine. He rubs his neck and thinks the child's condition is much better than before, but admits he was wrong. The doctor takes Ash's hand and feels his pulse. He looks thoughtful. The prince opens one eye and looks at him with it. He closes it again and curses since he completely forgot about the infirmary, even though he's almost healed the internal injuries.